Now, Barker further notes on page 51 that in the text called the Assumption of Moses, the idea here is that the text describes judgment on the fallen angels as the people are rescued from Satan, peace for Jerusalem, the advent of the Messiah, and the day of the Lord. Now, these three extracts from Deuteronomy, the Assumption of Moses is thought to be an expansion of Deuteronomy actually. These three ideas from the Deuteronomy, the Assumption of Moses, and the Melchizedek text in the Dead Sea Scrolls, they are mutually consistent, and they show that the heavenly high priest was the Lord who came from his holy place on the Day of Atonement in order to save his people from the power of the fallen angels. This story is in Genesis 6. He was going to punish their enemies, and he was going to cover the land. Kofar is the Hebrew word, meaning to cover. But she says it's probably more appropriate to mean to restore the land, or recreate it, or to heal it. And this kofar, this Hebrew word, kefer, means to cover. It's also one of the Hebrew words used in place of atonement. Her idea of this healing the land, defeating the enemies of Israel, and saving them from their enemies, this is all part of the classic text. This is part of the classic association of ideas with atonement. Barker further notes on page 53 of her text that the role of the high priest, the Lord, was to remove the damaging effects of sin from the community and the damages from the creation itself, and thus to restore the bonds which held together both the community of Israel as well as the creation that they found themselves in, that we find ourselves in. To restore the bonds. The bonds show that they are at one, together, with community and with God, one-on-one as well as a group. Very interesting how this atonement is a restoration. Many of the rituals of the atonement were for reintegration, not expulsion. The idea was not excommunication. The idea was to heal and bring the disparate parts back together in a unified whole, a restored whole. She says that this ties in with the servant figure of Isaiah 53, and I won't elaborate on the details of that too much. The whole point, here come the bees. Whew, that was a big bumblebee. They're bigger out here in Mother Nature than they are back in town in my backyard. In this part of my backyard, they're huge. Why the Lord himself was the atoning sacrifice is because the whole point of the argument in the epistle to the Hebrews is that it was Jesus, the high priest, who took his own blood into the sanctuary, as opposed to the ancient high priest of the Hebraic priesthood taking the blood of the sacrificed animal. Jesus himself took his own blood into the heavenly sanctuary. By doing this, he became the mediator of a new covenant. This is Hebrews 9:11 through 15. What I propose would explain the cosmic unity described in Ephesians 1:10, which says to unite all things in him, that is, in Christ, things in heaven and things in earth. And in Colossians 1:17 and verse 20, where it says, in him all things hold together, through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, to reconcile all things. I want to explore the Greek of the New Testament to show how universal this is, and then bring in the other ancient Egyptian text of the Egyptian Book of Breathings, which we have as a basis for our Book of Abraham in the Pearl of Great Price, and show how all of the texts from ancient times discuss this idea of the bonding, the fusion of humanity with divine. And now we're getting a new idea with this atonement ritual being a restoring of a worn-out order, both on this beautiful earth and in the phenomenal heavens. I want to explore this a little more. It's very significant. Now, I seriously contend that the three facsimiles in the Book of Abraham are a pictorial representation of the endowment. Facsimile number 1 is the sacrifice scene, which Joseph Smith attributed to the sacrifice of Abraham. Facsimile number 2 is the hypocephalus. They put it under the head of a mummy to keep the body warm, so that when the spirit returned, it could take back up its body in the resurrection. It's also a cosmological map. It tells us how to get where in the eternal world. This is the symbolism of the hypocephalus. And facsimile number 3, I propose, is the deification scene. Abraham on Pharaoh's throne. Pharaoh was considered divine. Abraham was the great high priest to Pharaoh, and Margaret Barker has contended that the great high priest is the Lord. So my argument is that these three facsimiles, these three Egyptian documents in our Book of Abraham, are classic pictorial representations of the entire process of the at-one-ment, the unification of the human with the divine, and the combination of humans living within the cosmos. That's our hypocephalus number 2. And it always involves a sacrifice. This is the classic definition of the at-one-ment, you see. Let me explore a little bit of Greek with you also. I think you'll be astounded at how powerful the Greek is in the New Testament, bringing in the cosmological angles on this.